Meekness is not um, weakness. It is another pathway to heaven now. All right, and I have three scriptures here. George, would you like to read them?
Surely. Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But I say to you that you should not resist evil, but whoever strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. Seek the Lord, all you meek of the earth. Execute justice. Seek righteousness and meekness. Perhaps you may find refuge in the day of the Lord's anger. Zephaniah
Okay.
2.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So we have two scriptures from Matthew, the Gospels. All right, and I have this one from the prophets, and that's the Old Testament. And the comment I have about these about is that this idea of meekness, um, it isn't just something that Jesus came up with that's brand new and all that. It's been around. You see it in that the prophet there, and you'll see when we talk about turning the other cheek, it has been in the scriptures forever. Yet when when we talk about it today, uh, at least in Christianity, um, it's it it's pretty much poo pooed if you want to call it that. You know, and it is interpreted as weakness. So let's take a look at just now. These aren't from the Bible. These are just traditional. Okay, to be meek. Okay, and this is in American English from an American English dictionary. Means to be patient and mild, not inclined to anger or resentment, too submissive, easily imposed on, spineless, spiritless, and obsolete. Now, this is it's pretty radical, but it is typical of probably the majority of thinking on me as to what meekness is. And what happens then is if people actually read Jesus' teachings and they just sort of go, they're not practical, and that's the way it goes. But but from a kind of a spiritual and from the Aramaic point of view, it is a wise, self-controlled, calm mind displaying gentleness that is not easily provoked. It is closely linked to and dependent on wisdom, humility, love, and mercy. So, right there, we're kind of taking away this idea that meekness is weakness. So, in Aramaic, the Aramaic word for meekness is machiche, and that word means gentle, kind, to bend, to be pliable. And just to mention here one more time to some of you, in the classical Aramaic of those times, each word, and well, there were only about 500 words. Okay. So each word has several different meanings, like you see here. And uh, that's just the way that the Aramaic language was. So we have a kind of a whole new definition here to be to be kind, to be pliable, or to bend. So to be meek is to be gentle, natural, and respectful of the rights, opinions, or practices of others. And remember last week when we were talking about humility, we weren't talking about um, being concerned with others more so than of ourselves. So the meek refers to a type of person who does not retaliate, a person who is free from a grasping temper that leads to disputes, quarrels often ending in bloodshed and murder. The meek practice non resistance, much like and pretty much the same thing as turn the other cheek. Okay, now let's keep going here and we'll. All right. Now, to demonstrate what just kind of what meekness is, and this is stories from our world today. Okay. Um, so I have this story. I wrote it on there, but it's not real long. Um, okay, Julio Diaz has a daily routine. Every night, the 31-year-old social worker ends his hour-long subway commute to the Bronx one stop early, just so he can eat at his favorite diner. But one night last month, as Diaz stepped off the number 6 train and onto a nearly empty platform, his evening took an unexpected turn. He was walking toward the stairs when a teenage boy approached and pulled out a knife. He wants my money, so I just gave him my wallet and told him, "Here you go," Diaz says. As the teen began to walk away, Diaz told him, "Hey, wait a minute. You forgot something. If you're going to be robbing people for the rest of the night, you may as well take my coat to keep you warm." The would-be robber looked at his would-be victim like, "What's going on here?" Diaz says, "He asked me, 'Why are you doing this?' And Diaz replied, 'If you're willing to risk your freedom for a few dollars, then I guess you must really need the money. I mean, all I wanted to do was get dinner. And if you really want to join me, hey, you're more than welcome.' I just felt maybe he really needs help," Diaz says. Diaz says he and the teen went into the diner and sat in a booth. So, so we have meekness here. Um, Essentially, turn the other cheek. To me, they're pretty much the same. Uh, just an example of what we're talking about. Okay. Now we know Jesus demonstrated everything that he taught. And Jesus, of course, was humble and he showed meekness uh, wherever he went. Now, I put this one down here. If you remember, so we can get an idea of, you know, meekness. If you meek, you don't retaliate. You don't talk back, and you don't argue. But so many times, and this is the one that came to mind for me, the woman taken in adultery. If you remember, the Pharisees and the men in the town came with themselves, and they just said, "Okay, Jesus, you know, um, that this woman is caught in adultery, and she should be stoned." And so, okay, now if it's kind of like confrontational in a way, but so what did Jesus do? Jesus sat down on the ground. He said nothing. He sat down on the ground and he thought about what he was going to say. And that is an example of not don't retaliate. Don't get the fire going. And the many times, the many times, the Pharisees and the scribes and that were challenging Jesus all the way through his uh, his mission, and Jesus never talked back. He never fought back. In other words, he didn't react, which is the big thing. So, uh, just to just to get an idea. Now, of course, when you read the Gospels, you see that Jesus was meek. He was humble and whatnot. But many people haven't read the Bible, haven't read the Gospels, haven't done anything, and they still think that meekness is like that first definition we talked about. I mean, look, when you get when somebody challenges you, I'm not talking physically, but when somebody challenges you, you're going to get ready and you're going to argue back and all that kind of stuff. And that's what has happened, even in the even in the Christian religions. It just has not. I say it hasn't been interpreted like we interpret it, but it's just meekness for most people is weakness. Okay. Now, so I talked about Dr. Errico in the beginning, and it just so happens that on this particular subject, um, I have a couple of presentations that Dr. Errico did many years ago, and they're actually parables. And I thought that we would listen to them tonight, and so that we could get an idea. And the idea here is the meek are must be bendable, must bend like a tree bends, okay, and be pliable, and not be like just narrow, and there's no gray areas. It's just it must be this, it must be that, and so so this parable. Now listen carefully, or you might get the wrong idea. But listen carefully, and then we'll talk about. But this is about bending and being pliable, and it's funny. Okay.
Morning is found in the Gospel of
No.
Matthew,
Oh, hold on.
fifth verse. It says this.
Okay. I'm sorry. Um,
Which reminds morning is found in illustrated beautifully. The Gospel of Matthew.
hold on. I got a problem here. Sorry.
Says this. Two-way horn. Which reminds me of
Here we go.
illustrated of a parable, illustrated beautifully. There were two men on an ox. There were two men on an ox.
Hold on. I can't ever do this right.
And they were sitting on the back part. One man, they had their legs dangling over the side. One man he had too much to drink. The other man was a good man, normal, fine, did good for his neighbors. He was a good man, a hard worker, everything. And the one who was driving the cart was going rather fast, and it hit a stone and threw both men out of the car. Well, good man broke his law. Moral of the story, stay drunk. Not really. But the principle there is the man who was inebriated didn't know whether he was sitting in the cart or was outside the cart or whether he was in the air or on the ground. He was so flexible. He was able to get up. And that's our problem.
Okay. And let me tell you what happened to the other man. The man who was a good man, but he was very but he was I don't know I don't know I don't want to say said this way, but he was, you know, life was narrow. You know, he was probably a good Christian and whatnot, but but when he observed a law, it was yes and no, and there was no liability. So I apologize for that. I don't know what happened to that one. So anyway, um, but to be meek is to be pliable and to bend and to look at the situation and not basically not have to always be right or 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 right in line, totally in line, and no leeway, no gray area. Okay. So now a little bit about turning the other cheek, which is exactly the same thing in my mind. But again, we go back to the Old Testament. All right. And there it is in Lamentations 3:30. Let him turn his cheek to him that smites him. Let him be filled with reproach. And in Proverbs, and this is really a good one, a soft word turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Okay. So basically, to turn the other cheek means don't start a quarrel or a fight, and challenge to resist systems of domination and oppression without the use of violence. That's the whole meekness, and you don't have to be weak, but don't do violence. So turning the other cheek and meekness is not a recipe for losing. It is actually a recipe for win-win situations as it prevents the creation of a cycle of violence. Turning the other cheek is not an attitude of weakness, but of strength. And basically, it's taking the wind out of the other guy's sails. Now, let me see here. Oh, hold on. All right. Now, I have another parable. Hopefully, this will be better than last one. I apologize for that. Now, I put a picture here because this is a parable by Dr. Erico, and it's the sword versus meekness. So hopefully, let's listen to this. Um, you need to be kind of visual when you're listening to this, and that's why I put this picture up there. So um, let's see what happens this time.
Two men from both schools on a boat. And the man from the samurai, dressed up in full regalia, there he was, very fierce, planted eyes, and did more for the pet. Had his arms folded, had his sword, had his helmet on. There he was staring, and he was aggravated and irritated by the man next to him. Because this other one was from school of meekness, leaning over the rail on the boat, enjoying everything. Finally, he said, man from the school samurai said, I'm going to challenge you. Will you take it up? You mean meekness versus your sword? He said, yeah. We'll see whose philosophy is correct. He said, okay, I'll take it. Both go to the captain. The captain stops the boat. Get in a small boat, lower it over the side. There's an island right there. And they start rowing out the island. Just before it hits the shore. And Samurai jumps out of the boat, pulls out his sword, whirls it in the air, comes down, whoop, ha, comes, screaming, hollering. The earth shook. The mountains trembled. The grass went and hid. It was so frightening. And he was turning around, coming down hard on the ground, and twisting and turning and swinging that sword. While he was doing this, other man quietly going away.
Okay, so you see, meekness can win, and many times does. Joe, I see a hand. Joe, if you
Hello?
have to, yeah, now I can hear. Yeah,
Okay, this is my first time, so I'm not even sure how these Zoom meetings work. But um, for years, I've studied Christianity, and the one thing I never quite heard the way you described meekness, and it makes perfect sense to me. That gives it a full, more reasonable meaning than what most of us would have thought. The other thing about turning the other cheek, only in the last few years, I began to wonder, because Jesus knows the nature.
Joe, could you hold with that part? Because the next couple slides may answer some of that, and then we can comment at the end, okay?
Oh, sure.
Okay. All right. Because I do, there's a couple things about that that I want to talk about. And then I would love to hear from you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the other thing about meekness and turning the other cheek, I wanted to put this in here about what it is not. All right. Now, when, uh, well, we used to travel with Dr. Erico, and no matter where he went, every time with this topic, a woman would stand up and challenge the idea of meekness and turning the other cheek, if her husband was abusing her. And every time we had to clarify, all right, most people think that turning the other cheek means just that, that you let them, if somebody hits you once, then you just let them hit you, continue getting, and that is not it. That is not even what it means. Okay. So so to clarify, um, self-defense. Look, if you are being attacked physically, of course, you will do what you can do to defend yourself. Now, there's nothing, there's nothing against that. That and that is not what that means. And of course, we have the other problem that people say that, and that's why they say, well, that's not practical. We can't do that. We have war, and in war, we're being attacked, and we have to do violence and shoot people. Well, that I mean, unfortunately, that is the way the world is, and that is essentially self defense. And so I just wanted to make sure that we pointed that out about what it is not, uh, because basically, now I will tell you one thing though. All right, some of the famous people, um, and Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, I don't know if you've ever read any of his stuff, about how things happened on the road and whatnot. But Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, uh, someone this was in a hotel one time, and of course, people were always scoffing and whatever, and a man came up to him and just was saying, "Yeah, your civil rights, da 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 da, and your nonviolence. Yeah, we'll see." And the man hit Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, in his situation, he did not fight back because he had a cause, and he didn't fight back. But I just thought I would mention that because I mean that really is the ultimate. Now, had the man continued, that would have been a different story. But it was just one of those things, and I'm not sure what he said back to the man. But the point is, he didn't retaliate, and so it didn't end up in being a big brawl, so to speak. So making that clear. And as you heard in that story by Dr. Erica, um, there are ways, meekness and turning the other cheek. You kind of have to combine it with wisdom, so to speak, and and you have to, um, basically you have to think before you act, but um, it's not always the case. But that's the big part of it. Oh yeah, and so if you're going to practice meekness and turning the other cheek, he, mostly um, things heat up when people argue because I have to be right. Okay, I am arguing and I am right, and I'm going to continue arguing until it gets to the point of violence or fighting or whatever. And so we're just talking about if you if somebody is arguing with you, if somebody is screaming at you, no matter what, I guarantee you, if you just be quiet and don't say anything, you will take the wind out of their sails. That there's just no there's just no question about it. And and walk away. So, you know, this may not be practical in every situation, but what Jesus, what Jesus was saying. Now, we'll finish the end of that parable in just a minute. But again, we're trying to we're trying to live a heavenly life now. And if we do, if we practice meekness and turning the other cheek, all right, instead of, all right, if you are arguing, okay, and you get into a little fisticuffs, or even if you don't, and somebody has to say, okay, just shut up and go, that will bother you. I don't care who you are, what the topic is, that's going to bother you, and it's going to go on and on. Whereas you 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 practice meekness, you turn the other cheek, then it's gone, and you can go back to your contented, happy, joyful life in heaven now. And so, just a few, just a few uh, pointers there, and no, okay. So the end. So what Jesus says and what the Beatitude says is that uh, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, we need to understand that in their terms, uh, their cultural terms back then, uh, it was customary in the Near East, uh, obviously, that when a man died or was killed in war, leaving no male heir, the meritorious uh, male would inherit his property. So basically, if we want to pull that same thing forward now, um, uh, you're likely to live longer if you are involved in all these situations where it might lead to a confrontation or whatnot. You'll live longer, and that's the general thing. But again, you will you will experience that heavenly state of being right here on earth, right now. So, um, just kind of what's in it for us. Meekness, it's a quality of God's presence in humanity, which all too often lies dormant. And this goes back to the fact that we are all made in the image and likeness of God. We have that God essence, that ability to love, and the ability to be meek, but it lies dormant um, in us. And so what Jesus was saying or trying to do was tell people, look, and as I interpret the Beatitudes, try this. You will like it. Try meekness. Meekness, you will like it because you will feel good inside. You will be content. So to awaken this latent force and encourage its growth, this beatitude blesses meekness within every person. So everyone can do it, and everyone has that capacity. But there again, it's in this world today. So meekness of attitude, mind, and heart helps us to live more freely and happily in this world. Trees that bend in a storm will survive the storm. When we roll with the punches, we will live more abundantly. Arthritic thinking, unbending thoughts, only stiffens our attitudes and makes it harder for us to live well. Okay, now, so these will be the questions for next week, but I'm going to turn it on to discuss now so that we can talk now too. It's doesn't matter. We just like to have, we just like to have people expressing their thoughts or their experiences with this because um, because the only way that there's going to be peace and that we're going to have a world, a heavenly world, so to speak, it has to begin with each one of us, and and then collectively, as it grows, that would lead to a worldly peace. But it's the inner peace now that we're talking about, the heavenly and inner peace that will allow you to live a heavenly life now.